Hello, aspiring developers. I hope you're doing fine. Welcome to today's session. Today we're going to learn about arrays. What is an array? We're going to see about the array literal. We're going to see about the array object. We're also going to learn about properties and methods in arrays like the concat and the dot length, the concat method and the dot length property. So if you're ready for the session, let's dive right in.
Yeah. So this is the basic way of declaring a variable. But now let's say you have maybe 100 courses that you're offering. It's going to be very hectic to declare course 1 to course 100. So the best way, or rather the solution to pass in, is to pass in all that data in a single variable. So for our case here, we can say let courses equals, then you pass them as an array, and you just say HTML, comma separated values, say CSS and JS. So now here you're declaring three variables with the values of courses being offered, but here you're declaring only one variable and passing all the courses being offered in one variable. So this is the first way that you can create an array, and this is the most preferred way. If you want to access the properties of this array, you can just come and say courses. Okay, let's log to the console. Courses and the index of the course. And also you want to log this one to the console, so you can just appreciate, or rather we can first log courses to the console, and we can also log all this to the console. So, yep. You can log all that to the console. So here we are logging the values of those topmost values to the console, these ones, so that it becomes even a bit hectic to log them to the console, because you have to type in each and every one, and you have to write the whole console log for all of them. But either way, if you run the script node and then the file name, you're going to see as an output here we have when you log courses to the console, courses is a variable holding an array as the value, and the array has 3 elements as its values. So that's what you're seeing here when you log courses to the console. And here when you log these single variables, you realize that it outputs the single values of those variables. So you see that arrays make our work kind of easier. It organizes that code, it makes it manageable. So let's just remove all this, because you've seen that all that can be done in a single line of code. So you may be asking yourself now, how do you access maybe a single element in this array? There is now a list here of items, but you may be wondering how to access a single element. So for you to access single elements of this array, courses of this courses array, you use the bracket notation. Just log to the console, the bracket notation. So courses, then bracket notation, and the property that the value you want to access. So arrays are 0 indexed, By zero index to mean that you start counting from zero. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, as you progress with all the other elements. So zero index simply means that the first item is 0 and the second item is 1. So that is it for zero index. So if you duplicate this maybe 3 times, then here you're accessing the index 0, the index 1, then here you access the index 2. Okay, you can just duplicate it so that you also access the index 3. Index 3, which is currently not available in our case. So when you log this to the console, I know you expect to see some undefined because we have here the third index being undefined. Yeah, so okay, you can comment this out. This one prints, we have already seen that it prints this value just as it is and it logs that to the console. But now if you want to access a specific item, then you just use the bracket notation to access the position of that, or rather the index of that element you're trying to access. But when you try and access a position that does not have any value, then you see that undefined is logged to the console. But now you can just define it here. So you can say courses and you say 3. Now you can pass in another value, let's say React. So when you save this and now you run the console, you notice that we have React also added to among the objects of among the elements of our array data type. So now if you log to the console, all the courses are going to see that React will be added in the list. So you see now here we have HTML, we have CSS, we have JS, and we have React, because now we have already passed a new value to the fourth position or the third index of the array that you just declared. So either way, you can also modify or you can edit the existing values. Like now you can modify this JS. So by just accessing it, you know how to access it. So for us to access it, you just need to say courses, then the position that it is, so 0, 1, 2, so position 2, and you can modify it to be JavaScript. You save that. Now if you run, let's just clear the terminal. So if you run the script once again, you're going to notice that we now have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React. So when you first output it here, it was JS, but once you modify it, you get JavaScript. So that's how to create an array using the bracket notation. That's how to access elements of an array. That's how to modify an existing element of an array, and this is how to add, or rather add an element to the existing array. So that is it for the first type of arrays. There is also another way that you can create an array using the array object class. So let's learn about arrays using the array object class, now that we already know more about objects. But first I'm going to comment out this the messages that you're logging to the console, so that you can easily understand what you're passing. So the new way of rather the other way of declaring arrays, you can say this time we're going to say that was courses. So what can we say? We can say instructors equals, and now here we are trying to use the array object to create an array. So you say new, then array. This is a built-in object, and inside there you can pass in the values of whatever you want. So here you can say maybe done. You can say Georges, and then you save this. Now here you have a new variable named instructors, but the value of this variable is an array, and this array has been defined using the new keyword. And new, you remember we said it's used to instantiate an item of an existing object. So in this case, the existing object is the array, and then you pass in the values because it accepts a list of values. Yeah, so now let's just try accessing the values of these instructors variable that stores an array. You just do the same thing. You say instructors, and there you can say 0, and you can log all of this to the console. Yes, just log all this to the console. So if you run the script, let's just clear the terminal, then we run the script. Now you see that instructor 0 is done. So that means that is the first object, the first element in our array object known as instructors. So just like this other one, using the bracket notation, we can also use the array object, built-in array object, to create a new array. Just like the other one, how you can also modify contents of that existing object. So you can say object 0 equals Daniel. So when you save it, and now let's say you log to the console instructors. Let's just comment this out first. So when you rerun the script, you see that done, the value of the first element of the array has been changed from done, and now it's Daniel, because here we just modified just the same way as we were doing on top here. So there's also another thing on that is also the other way of creating an array. So there's two ways. There's the bracket notation, which is the most recommended way, and then there's this using the array object. But this one, you learn that as you progress, at some point it converts the arrays to objects. So especially when you're using named arrays. So we're going to also learn about named arrays. But for now, that's how to create an array. And those are the two types of arrays. And that is how to access and modify an array. So the next thing that we're going to tackle is more of the properties and the methods of arrays. So let's see how that comes about. Okay, now on properties and methods of arrays, we already discussed what a property is, and this is just a kind of a variable key that stores a value inside an object, and the method is almost the same as a function, but now it's used as a property inside the object. So the array, since we said it's an object, can also have properties. And you remember that we said properties of an object can be accessed using either the dot notation or the bracket notation. So let us look at a few properties of the array object. So we can just say the first one, you can look at the built-in method, the built-in property length of the array object. Sorry. So here you can say instructors dot length
And the dot length property just outputs the length of the current length of the array that you're having. So here this array has only 2 elements. So the instructors dot length will output, it will log 2 to the console. So let us run the script. You see that we're getting 2 in the console. So the dot length is just used to give us the total number of elements in that array. There's another property also. Remember that if the array is empty, the dot length property will just return 0. There is another property that is called the concat. That is a method, the concat method. And concat method allows you to join two arrays and you create an entirely new array. So here you can say that you want courses and instructors to be, let's say, in one array. So you can just come and say, let this new array can be, okay, let info equals, now here we are trying to use the concat method of the array object. So you can now, okay, it's a built-in method, not specifically to the array object, but the concat is a built-in method. Same to the dot length. It is also a built-in property of objects in JavaScript. So here I'm going to use the concat to add. You can remember from operators, we said the concatenation operator or the plus, denoted by the plus symbol, is used to add. In operators, we used the plus symbol and you are just adding two arithmetic functions or two strings. But now in arrays, you are going to use the concat, the built-in concat method to add two arrays. At this point, you have these arrays, these array courses with 3 elements and these array instructors with 2 elements. So now we can concat courses and say courses dot concat, and concat is a method. So we said method are like functions, they have parentheses and they can take parameters or arguments. So here the argument that you're going to pass is the array that you want to add. In our case, it's the instructors array. So now when you log to the console info.length, you expect to see this 3, which is this is 3 plus these 2 elements. So you expect to see 5 as the length of this new info array. So when you run the script, you're going to see, oh, it's 6. Info.length. Info will take courses, which has 3, and it will concatenate instructors, which has 2. And why does info.length come to 6? Okay, let's just let info equals now I want to take this first array, which is courses. So courses, and now we want to use the .concat, method, because it's a method. We say methods are kind of functions, so they also have parentheses and they take arguments. Here the argument that we're going to take is the array that we want to concatenate to the courses array. So in our case, it's the instructors array. That's what we want to add as we want to add it to the courses array so that we can have a new array altogether known as info. So if we log info to the console, info, and we run this script, we're going to see that we have these 6 values: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, Daniel, Georges. So these are 3 plus 1, 4 plus these 2, so 6. So if you say info.length, you expect to see, not length, but length, you expect to see 6 as the output. So that's it for the .concat to add two arrays together and form a new array altogether, or it's the dot length to output the length of the array. So there are several other methods that can built-in methods that can be used. So when you type on courses, then you see the dot, you see the push that appends new elements to the end of that array that you're having. Then the dot length, we've already explained that this one gets the length of the array. Then the concat, you said it's used to add two arrays together. The dot join will just add the elements of an array into a string, but it will separate them with a specified separator string. So if you want to specify the elements, to separate the elements with commas, you can say dot join, then use the commas. If you want spaces, you just use dot join and the spaces. Dot slice is used to, dot slice, just looking at them here. So you say dot slice is used to, it returns a copy of a section of an array. So for both start and end, a negative index can be used to indicate an offset from the end of the array. So when you slice and say maybe example -2, it will refer to the second last element of that array. So we also have the start and the end. Start shows the position, where the position of the array starts, and end specifies where the element of that, the last element of the array that you're trying of the last element of that array that you want to slice. So the start and the end, those are the two parameters taken by the slice function. We have the copy within, entries, every, fill, filter, find index. All these are, we have the dot map. We're going to look at this also, the dot keys, index of. All these are the built-in methods that you can use when you're dealing with arrays. So we've looked at length, we've looked at concat, and we're also going to look at, I believe those two are good to kick you off, but you can just look at the dot slice. Let's look at the dot slice. You've seen that it takes two parameters, so where you want that array to start from. So here we have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, Daniel, Georges. So maybe you now want to again slice. This is in the info array, not the courses array, sorry. Then you can just say let new array equals info.slice, and here you want to slice, you want to remove, or rather you want to output only some elements that are in a specific array. So you pick where you want to start from. So you can start from index, see this 0, 1, 2, 3. So you can start from index 3, and then you go all the way to where you want that index to end. So you see that 3, 4, 5. You can end at 5. Yeah, so that's how you use the dot slice. But let's just log to the console so you see what's going on there. So log to the console, new array. So here we have an entirely new array. So when you run the script, you see that the new array has React and Daniel. So it picks the third element. So 0, 1, 2, 3. That's where we started from. So this is the first that will be output. Then we see that it should stop at 5. So 3, 4, and when it hits 5, it stops. So we are only outputting the React and the Daniel. Also, if you log to the console, info, so you run the script, you see that the info array is still intact. The value has only been, we've just created a new array altogether, and that is where we passed the value of our sliced. So once again, you can just use the dot concat to maybe join this new array to which array? To the courses array.
So let's try. Or now we can use the dot push. So we can say courses array, say courses, was it course? Yeah, courses dot push. And so as we said, the dot push just adds elements to the end of an array and it returns the new length of the array. So dot push, here the elements that we are taking is the new array. So we are pushing new array. So dot push new array. So what this does, we just take the causes. Where is the causes? The causes. Yeah, this is the causes. But you notice that we added this fourth element. So causes now has 4 items, and now dot push just means to the last element, which is now React, we add the new array, and here we saw that the new array has React and Daniel. So that's how the dot push works. So if you run the script, you're going to see that. Okay, I want us to comment these two out. And comment those two out. Then again we run the script. Okay, this one is outputting the dot length. Let's also comment that. Then we log courses to the console. We log the new courses now to the console. The one that we've pushed new array into. So we want to see it in the console. So you see that we have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React. That was our courses array. And then the dot push, we are dot pushing the new array. And the new array is React and Daniel. So that's how the dot push works. But you see that it adds it as an array. If you want it to add it as a string, you just use the spread operator. We already talked about spread operator in the previous session. That's just the 3 dots. So now if you run the script, you see that it adds all that, but without the square brackets. So it takes just the elements of that array and adds them to the existing array. So that's how the .concat works. We've talked of .concat, .slice, .push. We've also talked about the .length. Yeah. So we've also talked about the .length. Clear. So when you run the script, you get the .length, and there you see that the new courses array has a length of 6 items. So you can always learn more of these methods on your own. You just try and go through them for you to understand them better. And we've talked about 2 types of arrays. That is the literal array, or rather this one, the array literal, which is created by the bracket notation, and this array object, which is created by the array, this array also, which is created by the array object. We've talked about a few methods of an array and properties, like the .length. The .length is a property. So you remember that properties are just a kind of a variable, but for methods, they are kind of functions. So they end in parentheses, but for properties, they don't end in parentheses. But all of them are being accessed using the dot notation. We've also learned about the spread operator. That is the 3 dots, just used to concatenate elements of an array as a string into the existing array. Without the dot operator, you will concatenate that new array, but as an array to the existing array. So the last thing that we're going to tackle is something I mentioned on named arrays, or rather you can call them associative arrays. So let's dive right in and look at associative arrays. Yeah, so on associative arrays, just as we were saying, associative arrays, you can think of them as named arrays. These previous arrays are called indexed arrays, or rather number indexed arrays.
So you see that we access the values of this array using the index, or rather the numbers as indexes. So this is the index, and the index is a number starting from 0. But now for associative arrays, we access these values of the arrays, but using names instead of numbers. So that is very common in other programming languages. In JavaScript, we can simulate the same, though JavaScript does not have named arrays. Instead, it converts them to objects. So let us just look at one. Maybe you can say, should we declare a new array? Let's just declare a new array. And let's say, we can now use cast. And you can give values of cast like Volvo. Can give Peugeot. Oh, I'm really not sure about the spellings here. We can also pass in another value like BMW. We can also pass in Audi. Okay, I believe that's enough. So let's just have them in square brackets. So here we have a new array, cars, and this one you see that it passes values of 5 cars, 4 types of cars here. Yeah, so now for associative arrays, we said that they access arrays using named indexes. So now we can say cars, and you now say brand, or you can say brand1 equals Volvo. Let cars, or rather let's say let car equals, and we want to define, or rather have an empty array for the value car. So okay, here I'm using an empty array, but it's the good coding practices advise us, or rather it's good coding practices to define your objects, your variables, while assigning them. Don't leave null, don't rather define empty variables, or don't leave them as null. Don't leave them as null or undefined. The best way is just to assign objects when initializing it. But here, because I want you to understand associative arrays, and as I said, named arrays are not in JavaScript, I'll use this blank value so that you can get it better. So now let's say the first position of car, I'm going to pass in the brand, and here maybe I can pass in the value Audi, and can now pass in another car value, car, and the next element, or rather the next index, will have maybe the model. The first index took the brand, the second will take the model. Let's say what is a model of Audi? Do I really know of any? Let me just say GMT 5, and the third one can maybe say, can take price, and we equate it to how many dollars? Just say 40. Yeah, can say that. So here we are having an array car, and to this array car we are storing the first index as Audi, but instead of using the 0 as the numbered index, we're using a name, or rather a string. Same to the second and the third. So here I'm using a number so that you can just appreciate when we say that arrays can store different data types. So now if you want to access the values of this car, you can just log the console car. And now when you run the script, you're going to see that the car has a brand of Audi, has a model GMT5, and the price is 400,000. So that's how you declare, or rather, that's how you create an associative array or a named array. Though you see that it kinds of outputs them almost as a model, almost as an object, because it has a key and a value pair. So it stores everything in key value pairs. So that's why I say that JavaScript does not support named arrays with named indexes. They are all converted to objects. So it is better to use an object when you want the index to be a string, and it's good to use the index as numbers when you're trying to define arrays. So when you want to use an array, just use the numbered array, that is the accessing it using the zero index, and you define it incrementing just that way. And if you want to create named arrays, then the best way is to use an object. So that's it for the associative arrays. We can also touch on the math, a few objects. Let's just touch on a few built-in objects in JavaScript. An example is the math object. And you see the math object here also has several built-in methods and properties. So we have methods like flow, max, min, round. So the flow will just return the greatest integer. The max will compare the values that you supply and output the maximum. Min will compare values that you supply and it will output the minimum. The round will just round off to the nearest integer. The random will just output any random number. So if you don't specify, then it will be between 0 and 1. Just say math.random. Maybe you can store this in a variable. Let's say let random number equals math.random, and then you log this to the console. You log random number to the console, random number. Yeah, so when you run this script, you notice that we have a random number there, 0.7. Let me comment out the first console.log. But once again, if you run the script, you see that you now have 0.5. Where is this 6 coming from? Okay, courses.length. Thank you. Let me just clear the terminal once again and I run the script. And now you see we have another random number, 0.9. But you see that this is a very long value, or rather too many decimal places. So you can just specify something like, or rather you can now use the dot flow. Here is where you can appreciate the dot flow. Not the dot flow, sorry, but the dot round. The dot round. And this is also a method. So you just take random as an argument, such that whatever is output here will be rounded off to the nearest integer. So when you run the script, so now we can also look at the dot round. So you can pick the random number that is being output, and inside that you say math dot round. And so round, you see that it takes a number as an argument, and then that number will be rounded off to the nearest integer. So dot round random
number. So if you log this to the console, you're now going to see 1. If you log it again, okay, yeah, so you see that we're having random values and their values are being rounded off to 1. But when we get something like maybe 0.467, so you see that this will be rounded off to 0 because it's less than 1. So that's how the dot round works. That is how the dot random works. We also have the math.py, we have the math.flow. We have several values, so several methods of the math object. So if you want to work with some mathematical operations, the math object has already been predefined in JavaScript. You can always use them to make your work easier. I believe the last one that we can look at is the square root. Let's say let square root equals math. And remember, math is capital M because it's good to declare objects with capital M. So for the square root, you just say SQ square QRT squared, whatever that is. Then you pass in a number. So let's say you want the square root of 91, or should we say 81? And we log to the console square root. So when you run the script, you're going to see 9. I don't know if it's visible enough. There it is. You're going to see 9 because 9 is the square root of 81. So you see that it can be very easy for you to do some mathematical computations using the pre-existing math object. There's also the date object. I'll just mention a few. We're going to meet with several others along the course, and you'll notice how great they are because they'll be very beneficial, or rather they'll make your work very easy when you continue the development journey. So now the last I can access of today is maybe the date function. The date function. So we can just say let my date equals. Here you remember that this date function. Okay, let me just take you back a bit. Let me comment that out first. So you see here, we're just saying random number equals math.random. We're directly calling the method of this math class. So the same way you can directly call the value, or rather the method of this date class. Can directly call the method of the date class by saying you log that to the console. You just print that. So let me comment this square root out, and then I run the script. So you see that date.now gives us some functions. This is just the milliseconds in relation to returns the number of milliseconds elapsed since midnight January 1, 1970. That is the universal coordinated time, or rather the UTC. So that is what the .now does. But now let's say you want to create an instance of the object date. So I hope you still remember about how instance of objects are created. So let's say instance date equals new. You have to use the new keyword because now we are trying to create an instance of an object. Say new date. When you log this to the console, you say log instance date to the console. So when you run this script, you see that we are having today's date output there. So we use instances of an object, or rather of a class, because we may want to modify that instance of that object to maybe do some calculations or maybe change some values. But either way, you can still access the methods of the date object using the object instance. So when you come here and say instance date equals instance date dot now, and you save this script. So when you run this, we can use the instance date, which is the instance of the date class, to maybe make some modifications or access. You can just modify that date class using the instance of that object date. So let's say var current time is equal to, now we can use the instance date, which is an instance of the instance of the date object, sorry, and you can say dot. So when you say dot, you see that you're able to access the methods of the instance of that class, of that date class. So you can get the time, the get to string, get full year, get to UTC, date, day, hours. You can get all this. But for now, we just want to say get day. So current time, we're going to say instant.get day. We can have it as template literals. Just want to output some classic stuff. We can say day, can get the day, instance.get day. And then you say, and just have a space there and say time. No, we don't need to say time. Rather, we can say hour, because I want us to understand how all this works. So let's just write the hour and Alt Z to have everything on one space. So instance date dot, let me Alt Z so that it wraps down to below us here. So instant dot get hour. See, you can get hours there. We can also say minutes, and there we pass in the variable instance date dot get minutes. Where is minutes here? Dot get minutes. So here you see that we are getting the day, the hours, and the minutes. But remember, these are methods, so we have to end them in parentheses. You have to end them in parentheses. Yeah, that's it. So now I want us to see what instance date logs to the console and what the current time will log to the console. So now we can log to the console the current time. That's it. So let's run the script. So you see that the first one, which is my date, that is, we directly call the date methods and assign that to an object to a variable, sorry, and then that outputs the time in milliseconds, the UTC time in milliseconds, as we earlier said. And here we now create an instance of the date object, and when you log that instance to the console, you see that it gives you this very long format of the date, having the year, the month, the exact date, and then the time. But this time you see that it's not the exact time that we're having here. Mine is 9:28, but here you see that it's 6:27.
This time it was 927, but it outputs here 627, 34 milliseconds, point, all that stuff that maybe you don't even understand. But now when that is the instance date, which is the instance of the date object. Now when you look at the current time, and here you can use the instantiated object to call the methods of the date class. So instant date dot get day will output the current day, and the get hour will output the current hour. Then the get minutes will output the current minutes. So if I rerun this, you expect to see the current time is 9:29. So you expect to see 9:29. So the hour is 9, the minutes is 29, and today is the third day of the week. So the third day of the week meaning Wednesday. So you see it counts days of the week from Sunday. From Sunday. And so from Monday. So Monday being 1, then Tuesday 2, and today being Wednesday we have 3. But remember, for months it is 0 indexed. So we can also get month. We can just add here month, and we pass in the same thing, just using the template literals, $, curly brackets, then instance date dot get month. You save it. Oh, but remember, this is a method, so you must have the parenthesis. Yeah, so let's clear the terminal and rerun it. So you see that it outputs month 1. Just like I said, the date function stores months as 0 indexed, such that January is the first month, but it's indexed 0. And then February, so in February, that is the second month, and that's why we get 1 as the index. But you can always convert them such that they make sense, or rather they are more understandable to the user. We're going to check more on that when we learn about the countdown function that is going to be tackled towards the end of this introduction to JavaScript course. Yeah, so that's it for the date function. That's it for the math function. That's it for the associative arrays and the arrays in general. The arrays methods, the push, the slice, the concat, and the several others that we saw. Also, this is how you can create an array, either the array literal or using the array object. So that's it for today's session. To this point, I would wish to thank you for your participation. Thank you for choosing to learn JavaScript together. If anything is unclear, just note it down in the comment section, and we'll be glad to reach out with an explanation. If you notice any error, you just tell that to us, and we'll make the appropriate corrections. Otherwise, we thank you for spending your time with us. Learn the previous versions, or rather, if there's anything that you feel is new or we've talked about and you can't see it, maybe just access the previous videos and you can get more insights, or tap down in the comment section and we'll reach out with info on whatever you ask for. To this point, I would wish to thank you for your commitment of time. Be tuned in for the other videos that are to come. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave a like, leave a comment, share the video widely to those who you feel it may be of importance to. Have a happy coding week.